Hello and welcome to the TTI Distribution Download, the podcast where we talk about all things happening in the world of electronic components with the specialists of TTI. And now, your host for the TTI Distribution Download, Paula Renfro.
Hey everybody, thanks for plugging in to the TTI Distribution Download today. Got a special treat. We're always excited to have Gabe Osorio in the house. He actually comes in and spends some time with us in the sound booth. Thanks for coming, Gabe.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's always so much fun.
It's
right?
great to see you. Yeah.
For those of you who haven't heard Gabe yet, it's Gabe Osorio. He is TTI's Director of Marketing in our Transportation Business Unit. And he just loves, you're going to hear it in his voice, you've heard it before, he loves what he does. He loves this market. He loves technology. So let's kind of go back and pick up a little bit of where we left off before. And I'll tell you, honestly, this is really present on my mind right now. And I'm just going to say range anxiety. Because my husband has decided he would like a fully electric vehicle.
Exciting.
It's like, well, good for you that Gabe's coming in next week, and then we'll decide. So tell us a little bit about the state of EV, the charging infrastructure and stuff.
Yeah. So there's obviously a lot going on, and I'm sure if you're in the market for an EV or any car, right, it's big topic of conversation right now. Certainly is the infrastructure that's available for charging that car, because it can be a big part of that, right? And there's a lot of interesting things taking place. Last time I think we talked a little bit about the standardization taking place with infrastructure, specifically the interface for charging, so the NACS or NOx or however you want to pronounce it. But I read a really good article recently in The Verge that was drawing comparisons to the cell phone market, and specifically Apple and their recent change, forced or not, to get rid of the Lightning charger and move to a standard USB-C port that is much more widely available and easier to use, and a standard that's more broadly accepted, right? Than
right.
Just
so
the
you will
cable.
only need the one cord for all of our guests and all of our phones. Same thing potentially for cars.
Exactly.
Right? We'll only need the one connector for however many cars.
Yeah,
cool.
That's right. So most of the major North American automotive makers are moving to the NACS standard, which will open up, hopefully, much more charging infrastructure, tapping into that Tesla supercharger and charging infrastructure system that's already in place, that really, truly leads the way from an availability standpoint, number of charging stations, the units, the power that's available for them from high-speed charging for those superchargers. So really is a good thing when we can get to a point where we're standardizing an interface for charging, and we're not having competing chargers and just making it more difficult to add to the infrastructure network.
Is this going to make our evolution generally, is this going to speed that up?
I think so. I think it will. I think that, coupled with more investment and certainly more push from government investment, municipality investment, that kind of thing, will definitely help grow infrastructure availability faster. Certainly, one of the biggest probably holdups there is, if you think about it, it's I'll say relatively easy to go out and build a charger box, right, or a stand-up box. Okay. But think about the grid to get the power to those boxes. Those move slower. So, getting the infrastructure in place to get power to those.
They're not privately run.
No, and they will move very methodically and very specifically, and that will probably hold up or be one of the biggest gating factors, I think, in just rapid expansion, is just getting grid networks to support those infrastructures, especially along, freeways. If you're driving across the country out in the middle of nowhere, trying to find all the power that's needed for those stations.
Getting the power to the receptacle.
Exactly.
Does this mean anything to our listeners, particularly the design engineer, this decision and just generally?
I think so, absolutely. It helps, again, from a standardization standpoint. You're reducing the amount of options available for that interface. So it helps standardize components across the board, from the actual plug that plugs into your car and the inlet receiving the plug, to the components that are going to be used inside of both the onboard charger, the charging station itself. So all of it helps standardize and help really with the supply chain of those components and making them more readily available, because now we know which products are needed to a better degree.
Right.
Yeah.
Are we going to be able to supply those? Is there going to be a supply chain issue in terms of now everybody's going to want the same thing? It's a good thing, but how do the manufacturers look?
That's a great question. I don't think we're going to run into supply chain yet. I think that it's still pretty new, and the good news here is that many manufacturers are wanting to obviously enter that market and are coming out with options very quickly. And so by the end of this year, we'll see, many different options available. For example, just for the charger inlet and coupler itself.
And by options, do you mean a variety of manufacturers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay.
Yep. So and availability will increase, and production, again, because of government investment, right, that's out there, making sure that those are manufactured locally, and by locally in the United States, or at least within NAFTA, will help with that supply chain as well, too. So it'll be much more easier to get, source, and know where it's coming from, avoid tariffs, all those kind of things.
So conversely, there will be some of those connectors going end of life?
No, I don't think so. I think, so the other prevalent standard out there obviously is CCS Type 1, at least in North America. And where the market seems to be headed is NACS for automotive and passenger vehicle, and CCS 1 remaining with your commercial vehicle, off-road type charging systems to a certain degree. Think class 4 through 6 for commercial vehicles. Okay. So kind of your box delivery trucks, your last mile delivery trucks, your Amazon trucks, right? Those kind of things.
Sprinters.
Yeah. They're kind of perfect for that CCS 1. They don't need to necessarily fast charge in an hour, because they go return to a site and can plug in and charge overnight. And the CCS 1 seems to deliver that standard, and is a good option for that class of vehicle. And then bigger trucks and larger equipment, think mining equipment or Class 8 trucks, over long haul trucks, that kind of thing, are going to move to a standard called MCS, or megawatt charging, which sounds kind of futuristic.
Yeah,
and crazy.
I was going to say, this sounds new.
Yeah, it is relatively new. Again, like NACS, there'll be options available from manufacturers mid to late this year, probably in 2024. But it looks very futuristic. It's a kind of triangle-shaped charger that's about the size of my head.
I wondered if you were going to go there.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's a big one. Okay.
Yeah, but that'll be at, think more truck yards and exactly, where the infrastructure needed for that is serious, for the power that it takes to charge those.
Yeah, the power they're going to have to bring to the truck yard, et cetera.
Yep. Yeah,
right.
But it's exciting. So there are options coming for those as well too. So kind of 3 developing standards based on the size of vehicle or type of vehicle that we're talking about is kind of what it's shaking out to be like.
So that's that for the current state of EV charging. What else? What else should I be asking you about today? Where do you see the market heading as we move through 2024, and how about into the second half of this decade?
Yeah. I think, I mentioned one of the things. I had a conversation with the president of a high voltage cable assembly company recently, just regarding the expansion of the network. And I kind of alluded to it, a minute ago, the need for the infrastructure build out from the grid perspective, meaning getting power to the infrastructure sites. It's quickly becoming evident that that's going to be the biggest driver for how fast we can proliferate charging infrastructure. And really specifically, going back to the highway example, getting it out to remote areas where a consumer, a driver, could go from Texas to Iowa, and thinking of big open expanses of terrain and not having,
that box
limited gas
Tucum
stations.
Carry is not going to do you any good if it doesn't have power yet.
Exactly. So how do we get that, satisfied? And I think once they can figure out to incentivize, these utility companies to help support this quicker. That will help expand the infrastructure network much quicker. So lots of conversation taking place at these types of companies, EV charging companies, the charging manufacturers, I should say, on how do we turn that government investment into more push to the utilities to help them speed up that process. Again, it's a very methodical process, right, that has to be thought out, planned out, investment made, and unfortunately or fortunately, the investment into grid infrastructure is significantly more expensive than obviously that last mile stretch of getting power to a charging box. So building substations and, the distribution network for power, you can imagine would take some time. So it'll be...
and this is not an entirely new industry, but this is a new industry. That just this piece of it, right? Just this piece of it. If we want to add training, right? Headcount, personnel, issues, challenges, at least.
For sure. Yeah, without a doubt, right? I mean, it's a developing, technology.
Developing professions.
100%. Yeah, you need to put training into being able to offer the manpower available, right, to be able to, or the labor, right, to be able to build the network and expand it out. So certainly a training resource. Really, what it comes down to is a lot of resources.
Yeah, it's a lot of resources,
right? Yeah.
Right, ultimately.
From not only dollars but time, personnel, and technology that really have to all come together in a perfect storm to help rapid expansion, right? And that's usually the key word that everybody's looking for, is that rapid expansion. It's very funny talking to friends, colleagues. We had a conversation obviously about your husband looking for a car and just understanding the different varying opinions of where people are today on their acceptance of electric vehicles, right?
Yeah.
It's clear to see that range anxiety still exists, even though the network that exists today would most likely support just about everybody's needs, right? Especially for a city commuter.
Especially for the commuter, right?
Yeah, of course. You're not going to use a full battery charge to go back and forth from the office in one day.
Right.
But if you're living in a condo, or you live in an apartment, or you live in a high rise, or whatever that might look like, charging could be a big factor. Another anecdote here: we traveled recently in Montreal, and our Uber driver owned a condo in downtown and had to go to a gas station around the corner where there was a charger to be able to plug in his car. So he was telling us how he would manage his schedule and time to fit in that full charge of, or the commitment to get to that 80% charge that he was looking for on a regular basis. So
right, and hope it was available when he had allotted the time in his schedule to have that done. Those things cross my mind.
Yeah. So if you don't have the ability to plug in at home, bringing that into the equation is an interesting thing to think about, right? But again, I think the biggest takeaway there is that the market is evolving quickly, and even if we see current state EV, I'll say, challenges from a growth perspective right now, we're selling less EVs this year than we were last year,
right?
Or at least it feels that way.
Is that not true? I thought.
It's not.
Okay, good.
It's not.
Well,
really.
I say good. Yes, of course, good. Evolution,
Yeah.
good for humanity, that sort of a thing. But there's a lot in the news at this moment.
There is. Yeah, and I think part of that is, yes, there's some pullback. You're seeing Teslas get discounted, and different EV. Rivian has discounted their vehicles. That's a good thing in my perspective. You need a more affordable option to be able to affect mass adoption.
Other countries certainly have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Look at China, right? There's a very affordable EV manufacturers there, heavily subsidized and a few other things, but the adoption rate is much faster, much quicker with an affordability price tag kind of attached to it. So I think that's a good thing here, and I think we will see more EVs sold in 2024 than we've ever sold in the marketplace. But even if it doesn't necessarily feel that way. So we're growing, and this EV market is still going to continue to grow. But it just may be that the commercial vehicle or last mile delivery ends up being the one that is the faster growth.
That gets out in front.
Yeah. And that's okay, because that's probably a market that's much more ripe for it, at least for rapid growth.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's all still it's all still a good thing.
That's right. Yeah. All spells
So
opportunity.
this reminds me, I read this last year, but we didn't get a chance to chat about it. It was late last year. But it's a little, what came to mind was like a little bit of a leapfrog of this whole infrastructure thing. It was on solar powered cars.
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I love that question.
So why not?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question. Believe it or not, there are startups out there that are looking to, I don't know that we'll get to the point where solar power is replacing physical charging,
Okay.
or at least plugging into a network somehow for charging. But certainly, I think there are startups out there that are developing technology to augment your battery power, or at least help prolong your battery range. Or maybe powering accessories in your vehicle. So if you have a sedan of some sort, solar power could power your air conditioning unit or your infotainment system or whatever that might look like to help, again, extend the range on your battery. I think we're still a ways away from a fully, a full solar-powered vehicle like that. But again,
have you seen one?
I've seen renderings. I've never seen one
Right.
actually in person or anything like that yet. But what I have seen is on the commercial vehicle side, think of a trailer. So not the cab, but the actual trailer portion. There's a ton of surface area on top of that trailer.
Oh, right.
So for commercial vehicles, mainly, again, long haul trucks.
An electric commercial vehicle.
Yeah,
right?
but that space that's available on the trailer, using that to harness solar power, putting batteries on the trailer, and then using the batteries to actually power motors in the trailer itself on the wheelbase or on the axles on the trailer to help further prolong the battery of the cab itself. So that's actually
probably
happening.
First time. Oh, that's actually
happening now. Yeah, there's companies out on the West Coast that are developing that technology actively today. So we might be maybe 6 months to a year away from seeing some of those start to hit the road in earnest. Maybe in prototype phase initially, but certainly doing the testing to see what that might look like for, again, mass adoption.
It would be the end of the moonroof or the convertible.
Yeah.
You couldn't have a convertible anymore.
I'm not sure I'm there, but
that would be fun.
It certainly could be. And again, I think commercial vehicle is where that's going to probably lead the way.
Right.
And then you'll find applications quickly for passenger vehicles that will come to light from that. Right. Yeah. Once they harness that technology.
So speaking of commercial vehicles, let's talk about those. But how about let's talk about those in the next episode?
Sounds great.
Does that sound good?
That sounds
fantastic. You can stick around?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So thanks to our listeners today for plugging in. And if you learned something today, then you're going to want to listen to other podcasts that we have with Gabe. And, of course, we'll have Gabe more podcasts in the future. And take a look at Gabe's posts on same topics on tti.com/marketeye.
Thank you, Paul.
That's it for this episode of the TTI Distribution Download. For more information on any of the topics you heard about today, reach out to your nearby TTI branch at 1-800-CALL-TTI or visit us online at tti.com.